Great seeing everybody today. Hope you're all in good state. You are joining us for the Investing in Digital Healthcare and Therapeutics panel. We have quite a nice group of investors, people that have started companies, have really shaped the space with us today. And before we dive into their introductions, briefly, Amanda, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi, I'm Amanda. I'm an associate at Inkef on the healthcare team. Inkef is a VC fund based in Amsterdam, investing in tech and healthcare. And in particular with digital health, we work together with our tech team with their expertise in the digital space to really make investments that we feel are going to really transform healthcare. Really looking forward to this panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amanda. And my name is Johannes. I represent Wellington Partners here today. We're a Munich-based venture firm, have been investing into life sciences and tech for the past 30 years. And before we dive into the topic of investing in digital healthcare and therapeutics, we wanted to ask you, besides doing an introduction, telling us what you're really passionate about in that space. And Rana, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending. So I'm Rana Lonnen. I work at Novartis. I'm a health tech investor working in what we call in Novartis the Rx capital. So this is our venture arm that makes investments purely in health tech, data and digital companies. So what really excites me, to your question, Johannes, here, before actually becoming a health tech investor, I was actually in biotech. And when I joined Novartis and I was really asked to take part of, leading the health tech investment space in Novartis TRX. I got a little bit kind of worried I'm leaving science, going to health tech, but then I realized after this is really the right place for me and it is at the right time. Because what really excites me here is the potential of technology to really transform the way we deliver healthcare and care and transform our industry. Being an investor, we have money. Money is so important. Capital is really to enable innovation to grow. So what excites me is the combination of technology to change healthcare, but also being on the side of an investor. If you put the money into the right company, you can really change the future of healthcare. So that's really what excites me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Should we go into the virtual room? Vishal, you're next.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and I'm delighted to be here in hologram. Unfortunately, I can't be here in person, but I'm delighted to be on a panel with so many interesting people. My background, I work for a fund called Recode Health Investments, and we launched that fund in January. I have been in the investing and entrepreneurship side of healthcare for about 20 years. I've invested in biotech, devices, diagnostics, but since 2012, I've focused exclusively on investing in data and digital companies. And I've invested in about 30 companies. Some of them have done reasonably well, and which led me to think what I wanted to do now. And the gap that I found in the market was a true transatlantic fund which would be able to support companies in Europe to go to the US as early as they can, and equally for American companies to be able to come to Europe sooner in their journey. So along with a brilliant co-founder and partner, Armin Bidian, who recently left DCVC, we launched this new fund based in California, and I will be based in Europe and Armin will be based in the US. And we're looking forward to doing is backing the most exciting entrepreneurs at seed and Series A.
Fantastic. Thank you. David, you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning. It's really a pleasure to be back in person. No offense to the folks that are virtual. I'm David Gordon, and we are Longliv Ventures. Longliv Ventures is a fund out of the Hutchison Group, and the relevant asset of the Hutchison Group is an enormous network of drugstores, which is essentially where retail meets healthcare. We operate, the group operates north of 16,300 stores in 29 markets across Europe and Asia. group. Part of the group are brand names such as Superdrug and Savers in the UK, Osman in Germany, Watson's all over Asia, and also in Russia, Ukraine, Drogas, and so on and so forth. So it provides a very interesting cross-section of retail health. And when we say retail health, we mean real healthcare value. It's not about or marginally, it may be about wellness, but it is about healthcare, it is about regulated medical benefits for people. And we look to leverage the asset, which is 2 feet on the ground. Retail has no right of existence if they're not accessible to the public. So that's what we hope to bring the healthcare system, is the accessibility of the retail system, the brand, the professionalism, the ability to interact indirectly with the public and keep them engaged as it is, we're in the retail itself. In terms of background, I'm more of a digital person than a life science person. So I'm a latecomer to the life science arena. Aside from my activity at Longliv Ventures, I also am part of the National Steering Committee in Israel of the IT Chamber. So lots of chief information officers of very big institutions, which is a very interesting perspective for an investor or a startup, and good connections as well. In addition, recently I'll be joining the board of a fascinating non-for-profit organization working on providing for the Bedouin population in Israel. I'm based in Israel. They're in the desert, and there are lots of issues, one of which is longevity and healthcare. And I think what the advanced digital world has to offer to such context is fascinating, and I hope to be able to report more on that next year at Sachs or elsewhere. What I'm passionate about, self-service medicine. I'm a strong believer in empowerment, and science and technology has too much to offer. The healthcare system will never be able to cater for all that, assuming there will be resources to develop and validate. The consumers are digitized already, and it's time for more empowerment. And then COVID era, we'll probably talk about that, has proven that this can work.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Yaron, you want to go next?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Sorry for not being able to attend in person. I'm just recovering from my first COVID. Not fun. Let me tell you that. So I'm a partner at aMoon. aMoon is a $1.3 billion life science and healthcare focused fund. We invest globally in everything that has to do with life science and health tech, from sort of your classical biopharmaceuticals and medical devices to digital health, healthcare IT, research tools, and diagnostics. And we also invest across the lifespan of the company. So we have a fund called aMoon Velocity, dedicated to invest in early stage companies and a lot of venture building, seed and A rounds. Then a mid to late stage fund called aMoon Growth, which invests in sort of, mid to late stage companies. And then aMoon Edge, which is our public securities investment fund. We're a team of 55 professionals, most of us right outside of Tel Aviv in Israel, and a few in our newly minted office in Boston, which we opened up about a year ago. And we see about 2,000 investment opportunities a year and make about 10 to maybe 15 new investments a year. In terms of what I'm excited about, I'm actually excited about what appears to be finally the maturation of this industry, with particularly I'm speaking about digital health, and sort of the reduction of the noise around this opportunity and the emergence of what hopefully will be sustainable business models in this industry. So we used to be excited about every single digital health thing that crossed our tables, everyone's tables. Luckily, we did not invest in too many of those because of the realization that there isn't enough maturity around the business proposition of some of these businesses. And I think as we're seeing some winners as well as some big losers emerging out of this initial wave of investments, I'm excited about being able to crystallize and clarify for myself as well as for others what are the sustainable value propositions in this segment. Sure, we're going to talk a little bit about that later on today.
Most definitely too. Thank you, Yaron. Yves, what's your take on this?
Good morning. So first of all, thank you very much for having me at this beautiful 1:6 ratio of VCs versus founders. So I try my best to have here the position of the founder. So my name is Yves Nordmann.
Just shows how powerful founders are.
Thank you. So my name is Yves Nordmann. I'm co-founder, chief medical officer of docdok.health. I'm originally from Basel, so it's kind of a home turf for me. Very nice to be back in my hometown. I live now already for 8 years in Israel. I have some past in digital health. I'm one of the founders of Welldoc in the United States, which became the first FDA-approved app in the world in the field of mobile diabetes management. I'm also one of the founders of Oviva, which became quite big in Europe in the field of mobile nutrition counseling. I also founded a company, eMedicus, based in Basel, providing the first electronic medical record fully in the cloud already since 2011. And now since 2017, together with my co-founder Ulrich, who we met in the panel before, doing docdok.health. And I think my CV already shows what I'm passionate about. I feel that both as a doctor, which I'm by training, but also, sometimes being a patient, having family members being patients, I feel there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done in healthcare, mainly in digitalization of healthcare, the so-called patient-generated data, not finding their way back to the clinical systems, making it almost like being a pilot, flying without any data points to the next airport. So that's how I sometimes feel like as a doctor treating patients with chronic diseases. And I think also looking at this group here, but also the other stakeholders in healthcare, there is a huge amount that can be done for the benefit and the sake of the patients to improve efficiencies, to improve the outcomes. And I think that's enough to be passionate about.
Thank you so much for some great introductions. I'm really looking forward to diving deeper. So I guess as an introductory question, and Yaron, I think I'd like to ask you first. What do you see as the most promising areas for investment in digital health? And are there any unmet needs that you really think are very exciting at the moment?
Yeah, so thanks for that. Wow, that's a heavy one. So the way we approach it, the way I approach it is a little bit less about the verticals and the particular opportunities, and a little bit more about what, as I sort of hinted before, what we're seeing in terms of the maturity and sustainability of business models in this field. So I'd like to say, that about 100% of the opportunities we see in digital health are able to address a significant unmet need, either for the patient or the provider or the payer. And in fact, about 70 to 80% would address significant unmet needs for two of the three. So something that benefits patients and providers, or providers and payers. But actually close to 0% of business models and opportunities that we see still actually find the perfect point in being able to offer significant value propositions to all three. So we call it the trilemma. You need to have a business that benefits patients, provides providers with benefits like maybe increased revenue, reduced time and wastage, but also provide payers with benefits such as, again, reduced pay, reduce attrition, etc. And many of the businesses, in fact, the vast majority of the businesses that we see do not think clearly and do not articulate clearly how they're able to generate value to address all three. And even fewer, if it's possible, of the businesses actually are able to generate evidence that suggests that there is clear, economic benefit to the payers and the providers while providing a health benefit to patients. So when you ask me, where are the opportunities? The opportunities to me are opportunities that lie not in just sort of having new ideas of how to diagnose things early or how to have more accessibility to patients or providers. It's really these ideas that marry these three value propositions together to patient, provider, and payer. We made a handful of investments like that when we became convinced that there are clear opportunities like this, including, by the way, a Basel-based company called Lifegen. And I think as we move into the future, it's only these businesses that are going to be able to demonstrate clearly an economic and health benefits to these three stakeholders that will succeed in the long run.
Thanks so much for that. Rana, I'd love to hear your take. What do you see as the promising areas in digital health?
Yes. No, sorry. Okay. No, thank you. I think I would like to link my answer to what Yaron really shared in terms of maybe initially when we started investing, it was more focused on this company can do this company can do this, but now it's really more about how do you marry all of these companies that can bring all of the incentives together. I think Yaron mentioned provider, patient, and payer. I would like to add my perspective as a corporate venture from a pharma. Maybe I would start with, us as pharma, we are a strategic investor. If our raison d'etre is really to bring medicine to patients with better outcome, to improve their experience, but also make medicine affordable and accessible, then my interest really in where I am at the moment is really to look across the value chain of pharma. Where can we do better using technology? So what really excites me generally, if I look at the value chain, is companies that are in the AI-based drug discovery. We've used the same way of doing discovery for a long time. Now we have a golden opportunity to use tech and AI to enable us to predict better compounds, proteins, using also AI-based imaging. Also, if I move to development, this is really a huge, we are still scratching the surface here. Companies that enable, we have a lot of digital recruitment companies out there, companies that enable digital biomarkers, so really moving from the era of genomics to proteomics to really digital biomarkers and make use of the data to make decisions and guide drug development. Also, real-world data, real-world evidence, this is really top of my list. To really use that data to enable better patient recruitment, stratification, precision medicine. And then you go to virtual care. How do you help patients outside the walls of the clinic? And then to supply chain. So all of these really interest from my side separately. But going back to Yaron's comment, is really to look at these not individually. It's how are they going to really connect with each other? How many times we see, or we are interested in a company that is in real-world data in development. Why don't we actually just bring this upstream forward all the way to discovery and really start that with a mindset straight away when every time we want to do drug discovery and development, it's really about not anymore individual companies, about how are we going to execute and make use of them across the full value chain, because this is here when you are able to unlock. And then on top of that is really how these companies that we are investing in pharma can really align with patients and payers and providers. So I think this is really where what is interesting for me at the moment from the investment standpoint.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on this. It's really interesting to understand what your interests are, but Yves, I wonder, you as a founder, if you hear this and you also hear a sort of a notion of what they define as success, what's your take on this? Like how do you make sure you actually deliver upon those requests from your investors?
Yeah, first of all, I think both viewpoints were very, very interesting and to the point. And I think it's also kind of the evolution we see in digital health. You know, it started with insular applications. And by now, I think all the stakeholders agree that the insular applications are part of the problem, not part of the solution. And, you know, I need to take also some bad credit for myself because I founded two companies that were very much into the solutions. So I think it's also learning over time. And I truly would say 100% agree with what was said before, that we need now coming up with a more platform-oriented solutions, also within an open ecosystem. I think healthcare was a closed system for much too long, with a lot of silos, being hospitals, be it pharma, be it private practices, and we need to open up as a society to make changes in healthcare. And what we're really doing at docdok.health, I was smiling internally when I was hearing, is exactly that. We have now one single platform addressing all the stakeholders, from pharma, over the payers, over the providers, to the patients, and engaging very much the healthcare professionals. Because if they are not part of the game, nothing will work in healthcare. They're just, you know, too powerful and have, I think, still the best access to the patients. So that's what we are trying now with docdok.health quite successfully, and what we would like, of course, also to continue.
Fantastic, thank you. David, you mentioned earlier you want to empower people, you want to empower your customers. When you hear the words of Yves, how do you define success for your portfolio? When you look at your companies that you had invested in or that you have invested in, what defines success for you there?
Well, there's several ways to answer that question. From the fund's point of view, we're strategic, so we're corporate venture, if you like, looking to make a difference for the companies with the reach of our retail footprint, and from the retail point of view, we really want to enable them to bring more healthcare to the public. So we certainly will value traction among the consumers and the ability to enable a shift from more and more from the front of the store, which is bubblegum and soaps, to the back of the store, which is nurse clinics, telemedicine, diagnostics, vaccinations, and things like that. With your permission, I wanted to, to maybe add a little bit more concreteness to the very good articulation of the general model that Yaron and Rana you proposed. There's some, now that we understand the requirements of a good solution, something that will be successful, what are examples of things that can actually work? And what are and I would like to toss a few ideas for people, because these are things that we have been seeing and we believe could be promising. One of them is about what I call the continuous sensing revolution, which is very much about, now that we can measure things, it's diagnostics, but it's diagnostics over time. And medicine has learned from the diabetes use case that looking at a series makes a difference. Now you understand the real condition, whether it's blood pressure, glucose, pain management, sleep management. So there are lots of people coming around with sensing technologies and wearables, and check the number of sensors in the Apple Watch now. The potential is huge, but medicine is going to change its value prop when people understand the full breadth of the phenomena. And blood pressure, I think, is the next case, because like an ambulatory blood pressure management system has not been successful so far, and doctors really need that. And again, this would have to fit in like proposed to the triangle model. Another example is where medicine is engaged in trial and error, which is a very costly practice. It works, but try this, come back if it doesn't work, try that, come back if it doesn't work, that again you'll find a lot of gynecological issues. There's a lot of room and opportunity over there. And finally, systems that can, you could call them decision support systems, but it's really more than that, really upskilling, because there are not enough doctors, not enough practitioners. So if you can upskill practitioners that are more available to do things like the nurse practitioner in the US, which was empowered to do what doctors can do. So our technologies, our digital technologies, can really make a difference there and help, like a general practitioner act as a diabetes doctor, for example. So those are examples. Obviously, they need to plug in. They need to work for the consumer. They need to work, I call them consumer rather than patient. They need to work for the doctors, and they need to work for the payers.
Thanks so much for that. So moving a little bit more towards digital therapeutics, the first question I have here is, we see a lot of CBT plays in DTX, and especially in mental health. It's clearly a natural partner for digital therapeutics. What MOAs excite you, Vishal? And beyond this, which therapeutic areas do you think look exciting for digital therapeutics?
Thank you for that question, Amanda. A lot of my experience around the digital mental health space comes from a couple of investments I made in that space. One of them is called ISO Digital Health, which is a CBT platform which started in the UK and has now a decent market share in this market. Not only is it clinically validated, but it has over the last 5 years become the most effective CBT product in the UK market. So it has the highest recovery rates compared to any other provider in the UK. So this product is consistently delivering up to 60 to 65% recovery rate, which is almost unheard of in the mental health space. And the way they have done it is that they basically leverage the data. So they provide CBT using chat. So every conversation is already converted into text. And then using machine learning and AI, they're able to target the right therapist to the right patient, as well as the right kind of therapy. And now they're moving into the next generation of digital products, which will get more and more automated. So I have not found anything so far which does not currently have a human at the other end, which will have the level of outcome that a payer would want to happily pay for. So I think that there is still some time to go before we find those products that will be able to deal with not just mild and preclinical elements of mental health, but moderate to severe as well. So I think that's the space which is worth watching. I think that mental health, the demand and supply equation in mental health is very, very unfair to patients. There are waiting lists to see professionals which are completely unacceptable, even in the most well-funded healthcare systems of the world. And I think that is an area where there will be a lot more innovation to come. I do believe that there are challenges in the business model. I think in DTX, the greatest challenge we have is that there are two worlds that are colliding. There is one world of the pair therapeutics who completely want to ignore the fact that this is a digital product with digital properties, and they want to dispense it like a drug. And then on the other hand, you have companies like, say, Quit Genius, who actually understand that this is a digital product, and they want to deliver it as deliver it digitally without sort of going back into the legacy of the old pharmaceutical model. And I think that that battle will carry on. And I think that I believe not only because Quit Genius is an investment of mine, I believe that side of the equation will win because the power of digital is just unstoppable.
Great, thank you. Ron, I'd love to hear the pharma perspective on these digital therapeutics products and how you look at it as a corporate investor.
Sure. So I think probably it's not a secret. Everybody knew that we made an investment in Payer a long time ago. We actually...
My apologies, Rana, I did not know that.
No, that's fine, Vishal. I'm glad you mentioned it because you just revived my memory. So Pear was actually probably, we were maybe the very first pharma who made an investment in digital therapeutics, which was quite a bold move, but we did not know much. And I think probably the company also was also learning. So for me, although the relationship really didn't go, we entered into a partnership, and we were planning to co-commercialize this together. It didn't really get to that outcome, but we learned a lot from this experience. If a pharma really wants to be part of developing a digital therapeutics as a standalone and really commercialize it, I'm not sure whether this is the right way forward. I agree with Vishal, but if a pharma wants to do this, I think probably we really need to treat it very similar to if you are making a launch of a therapeutics. You really need to treat it in the same way as launching a digital therapeutics, not to put maybe a small amount of sales force to really bring it to the doctors. I think this is one of the learnings. Also, again, if this is a digital product, it really needs to be delivered digitally. Again, I agree with Vishal on that. I think one of the most important things, whether it's a digital therapeutics for nutrition or for CBT or for musculoskeletal, I think it's very important, not necessarily only what it is treating, but is the workflow. How is this digital therapeutics is really fitting into the workflow if the route is going to be the route of pharma prescription? And I think this is really where the one of the hurdles that these companies are facing. And then again, it's a learning curve. I think companies are learning more and more that it's really about sitting with the users, observing where the solution is going to be used, and developing the solution to be designed so it fits well within the workflow there. How do we see us as digital therapeutics? I think we are still excited about it, but with more of a caution, I would say, because the business model is really still to be found out. Whether we are the right partner to commercialize it, my personal opinion, no. But we are still looking into companies in this space, but we need to really evaluate the full kind of proposal before we make an investment.
Great, thank you.
That's my honest opinion.
Thank you, Rana. I wondered about the evaluation process. So we as sort of next generation or emerging investors, we always struggle to assess a company that hasn't provided a point of a clinical validation. David, you mentioned earlier, for you, continuous sensing is an area that you find particularly interesting, but how do you come about an investment decision if you haven't seen the proof?
Well, that's the crystal balling thing that we need to engage in, and I think a lot of it, when you're dealing with a growth company, then the answers are pretty well known. But when you're dealing with an early stage company coming with an idea, what we I guess are looking for is that elusive concept of traction. And traction can be measured in many ways, and there are many wrong ways to measure it. So we try to avoid the wrong ways and look at the good ways. So for example, when you talk about the triangle of interest of stakeholders, then obviously you want to traction that reflects it, whether it's user engagement, usability, or whether there is someone out there willing to invest resources in the development in the stage that you are. Do you have a design partner? Is there a real business involved? Examples of bad traction examples to me are like early adopters. You say we have these first 1,000 people that are willing to pay in a Kickstarter, so we're obviously we have user traction. No. Innovation departments in strategics. Unfortunately, fortunately I spent many years at a big corporation and many innovation roles, but we need to know the limitation. Innovation people are very important in the ecosystem, but as traction evidence, being endorsed by in a PowerPoint of an innovation director in a corporation doesn't really indicate that you'll have a business partner later on. So that doesn't work for us. Early success in machine learning exercises on a small training data set, that doesn't work as well because the problem may not converge. So we have invested in companies that are obviously beginning to sell and have good science, some initial rigid validation studies, and really having a design partner is helpful, again, on the early stage. And there is a leap of faith. You need to look at the people and see, they have something, they're onto something, but will they be able to pivot in the right way in the next chapter? Because they will pivot, and it's not a question if. So, but again, like most people recognize, it's crystal balling, and we don't really know. We do try, for our specific fund, we have our business partners and they have the retail aspect, so that provides an additional secret sauce to our evaluation process.
Fantastic, thank you. Yaron, since you see sort of all of the spectrum, I wondered what's your take on this question?
Yeah, thanks. Before I comment on this, just want to give a lot of credit to Rana for sharing the DRX and Novartis perspective. I hope everyone in the audience paid very close attention to her response. This is really illuminating to think about the global leader of digital therapeutics and digital everything, in my view, Novartis, a very, very smart, very innovative, very sort of forward-looking organization, being somewhat conscious and careful about this space. This is something we should all heed and take pay very close attention to. Not to say that there is an opportunity, but just when someone comes to me with a digital therapeutic product or company, what I normally look out for is statements like, well, it's a digital therapeutic, so it's going to be easier to get market penetration, right? Because it doesn't have the side effects. Or it's a digital therapeutic, so it's going to be easier to regulate. It's like, these are two red flags, right? It's not easier to regulate. And in fact, a digital therapeutic is inferior to a regular therapeutic once it's approved in terms of penetration, in terms of convincing patients and physicians that it's actually worth prescribing this thing. So I think, we need to be very careful about not falling into the trap of putting digital in front of everything and just making it easier and simpler. On what we do, so aMoon is a very active investor, and so what we do is we actually put the business, the early stage business, in front of multiple stakeholders. So we arrange 3 to 4 customer calls in which we sort of watch them pitch to a potential customer and then get feedback from that potential customer about how they view the product market fit. So this could be a provider system or a payer or a payvider or something like that. And I think, what we've learned by doing this is, number one, the company benefits from actually making these new connections with potential customers. They appreciate the intro. We get a lot of immediate and actual insights from these dialogues about how the idea is resonating with the target audience. Are they sort of getting convinced, or are they actually pulling in? So that the investments that we make are investments in which these calls end up more often than not with, we want to have a follow-up call with this company. This is very interesting to us. A conversation that starts by the company pitching and converts very, very quickly into the provider actually asking for the service or for the product. These sort of real world market meetings are very critical for us as we form our original opinions about whether a business model or an investment hypothesis is worthwhile.
Thank you so much. So Yves, I would love to ask you, when we invest in companies like yours, how can we best support you to move towards delivery of your product?
I guess it depends very much on the company you're investing in. Certain companies, I would say, have a big lack, let's say, of medical workflow knowledge, so you can assist them there. Others have a big lack in what David mentioned, the user experience and the design of the applications. So I think it's very much depending on an individual use case. Very hard to give a very concrete answer here. But in general, I would just say that what Yaron and also Rana mentioned, I think it makes a lot of sense to me. That, I think the original hype about DTXs has faded a little bit. Also looking at Germany, Johannes is from Germany. He knows what I'm talking about. There was a big momentum for the so-called DGAs, which is kind of the German translation for DTXs. But what we see in the market is that the physicians are very hesitant to prescribe such DTXs or digital-only solutions, and I think that's the part that needs to be cracked. So we need to find solutions that are benefiting the healthcare providers first and foremost, because if not, they are not willing to implement. And I said that before, that's a crucial hurdle to overcome. If you speak to 10 German doctors about digitalization in healthcare, they will all tell you it's a pain in the neck. Nothing is working. We're now 20 years working on an e-prescription. It's not working somehow, and the things like that just makes it very hard to implement it. So I think from a VC in the field, I would expect that he understands all different challenges because there are multiple to bring a product very professionally and successfully to market.
No, that's very true. Thank you so much. Vishal, I'd love to know your opinion from the investor perspective. How can we help steer companies towards delivery once we've invested?
Thank you very much for that question. I think that there are a number of things that we can do. So first, I'd like to pick on some of the points that were already raised. So I think Yaron talked about a real life sales situation to put the founders into. And I think this is really critical. 9 out of 10 people in the world suck at sales. So it is completely logical to expect that 9 out of 10 founders in digital health space also suck at sales. So in fact, it might even be higher because we are pre-selecting for a different type of personality. But I think that I find it really, really hard to back companies where I can't find even one of the founders or another person in the company who really has passion for sales. And I think that in many parts of the world, including Britain, where I live, sales is seen as a dirty word, and smart people don't want to do sales. And I think that I would highly recommend everyone who's in this industry, and including us as VCs, we should emphasize that sales are really important, because sales of digital product is different from sales of pharmaceuticals. If you are developing a drug that cures cancer, you need virtually no sales. And even then, pharma companies end up investing billions of dollars in selling those drugs. But if you're making a product which is a digital product and probably doesn't address a life-threatening condition, it's going to be really, really hard for you. So for me, sales, and as I go through this industry, I develop greater appreciation for sales, and I'm very, very respectful of people who can do good sales. So that's a point which I did want to convey. This second point to your question, Amanda, how can we help on entrepreneurs and companies? I think that quite ironically and paradoxically, the digital world is quite fragmented. One would imagine that you would have one digital product and that would just spread like wildfire around the world. It doesn't work like that. It is a very fragmented industry. So one of the things we can do as investors individually, like us who have experience of more than one geography, or as syndicates that have investors with expertise from different parts of the world, is to try and help defragment that market in some way. And this is probably something for founders to think about when they build a syndicate, to see which markets they want to access and how they will expand into those markets. digital health investor universe is becoming more and more specialized wherever you look. I think that on the one hand, bigger, more generic investors are moving into space, but you always find these days, every few months, a very specialized digital health investor cropping up who has specialization of one geography or one type of products that they invest in. And I think that that specialization is necessary in the business.
Great, thank you so much.
I wanted to come back to one topic that we heard repeatedly, which is the challenge of a working business model. And Yaron, I think you depicted it first. Can you name examples where there is actually the presence of a functional business model?
Wow. Yeah. So like I'm hesitant to tout our own horn and talk about investment we've made. Let me do it anyways. So I mentioned before a homegrown startup called Lifegen, which aMoon invested in pretty recently. Lifegen was founded by a team that mostly came out of Roche, the market access team. So folks who truly understand some of the challenges and opportunities in market access. And what Lifegen created was a platform that allows payers to engage directly with pharmaceutical companies and medtech companies and enter into outcome-based contracting. So the idea with outcome-based contracting, which 5 years ago was sort of an anecdote, and today it's hard to open the newspaper and not read on a daily basis some paper around this, is with the advent of new therapies that are incredibly expensive with relatively limited evidence for long-term safety and efficacy, payers and pharma companies are at odds about pricing for these products. And so what Lifegen allows these two organizations to do is enter into an outcome-based contract based on a library of contracts that, as well as a link to the real-world evidence of the patients actually using and their clinical outcomes, to really adjudicate sort of patient-level discounts or rebates per drug. So you can imagine a contract where the pharma company says, I'm gonna charge you full price if there is full recovery. I'm gonna charge you 20% discount if there's need for an additional treatment, 40% discount if you're using 6 or 8 vials on top of the original vial, all kinds of things like that. The problem with on the payer side is that they don't have access to patient level data. So they actually have people sitting on Excels and adjudicating patient by patient situations of how much do they charge pharma companies back rebates for drugs. So Lifegen created this platform, and at the end of the day, there's clear benefit to pharma companies that are able to enter more rapidly into these contracts. There's clear benefit to payers with their sort of contact and access to real world evidence and being able to process these rebates and refunds clearly. And most importantly, there's a clear benefit to patients because this agreement gives you faster access to drugs. So I don't know if you are familiar with discussions, and I'm not going to mention pharma companies in the past around access to very expensive liver drugs or others. There's been this stalemate, like payers and pharma are sort of arguing with each other about the appropriate cost of a drug. And on the sideline, there are patients that are just waiting to get this drug. And so the ability to sort of allow these organizations to very effortlessly and seamlessly engage with each other creates this win-win-win situation that I described before about everyone benefiting from a particular model. I'll very briefly mention another one. We've invested in another company. It's US-based called Graphite Rx, which essentially connects hospital systems to sellers, meaning manufacturers, distributors of drugs and medical devices in sort of like an eBay or a marketplace type situation. So instead of these guys going website by website, looking for some reagent or some drug or some device in multiple providers, and looking at their discounts and having to sort of run the entire purchasing activity of the hospital in something like we used to do travel 20 or 30 years ago. Everything now is on a single platform. You put in a query, you get exposure to hundreds of manufacturers and wholesalers, and the platform, there are now 400 hospitals in the US on this platform, and the platform is effortless for the providers. Again, accelerating the availability and the cost effectiveness of drugs while allowing manufacturers to sort of service more hospitals and do more business, all while serving the patient. So just two examples of how digital health or healthcare IT, doesn't matter how you want to call it, actually enables better healthcare, better access, better quality, better cost efficiencies in this system, which, as we all know, is very close to a tipping point of just breaking down completely. These are the kind of models that we have been investing in.
Super interesting. Thank you very much. Yves, you're a serial entrepreneur. What's your take on a successful business model that can actually work in digital health?
Look, I think we are at a very interesting turning point in history where governments start to fund initiatives, starting in Germany, but now I think going all over Europe. For a startup, I think the holy grail is a model where you don't need to do too much to sell a lot, meaning to come into a reimbursement by a payer, regulatory approved. So it's the same concept as a pharmaceutical company needs to go through in developing a drug. So developing an app on prescription, so to say, where at the end of the long journey, you are going to be reimbursed on a per patient, per month fee for chronic disease areas. I think that's the most fascinating and I will say theoretically most easy way to make money as a startup, as you know the hurdles are high and there's a long journey. And maybe also to feed back to the VCs here, see what we perceive as a big problem nowadays for startups in the field is exactly the point that people want to see traction, but to get to the point, let's say for a DIGA or an app on prescription, you need a lot of money to get there because you need to go through the whole regulatory process. And I think here again, maybe what David said, that you need to have those crystal balls to know where to go. But I think here we would need more support to get to the point that we can show that what we are doing is effective.
Great, thank you so much.
I think one thing, just one short thing about this. So the elephant in the room with digital therapeutics is that people like us in the healthcare system are trying to enter the apps world, and an app, or as in gaming maybe, or as in the app store, is a very different world, and the businesses are very difficult, and the major issue is churn. How do you keep people using it? So if you don't know how to do that, you're not going to succeed. And I would listen carefully what's happening, and I think, Yves, you've been practicing, as I'm praying here, for many years already. You need to listen carefully to the digitized world, because digital health is a term that's going away. Forget it. I hope next year we won't talk about digital health anymore. It's obvious. You don't talk about digital forensics, or you don't talk about digital in the banks, and digital banking. Obviously, it's digital. Healthcare is going digital. So the digital startups need to listen carefully, and you'll find the places where you're in need. And all of a sudden, they're just happening where maybe there's no startup, but they'll develop it themselves, the IT people.
Great point, David. Thank you.
So maybe Amanda, just very quickly, I know we're running out of time. On the business model, just my observation, being also inside the pharma, there is some companies really develop really great business model in a way that you have your model set up to bring you recurrent revenue yearly, and all of this is perfect. The challenge that the companies face is really the long sales cycles from the pharma, from the providers, from the payers. So the companies have to go through this difficult kind of a phase. Sometimes it takes up to 9 months to really close, or maybe a year to close a contract. So really making sure to secure a business model that brings you a recurrent revenue is really important after all of this effort. But also it's our responsibility as well as investors to try to see how we can help companies to accelerate that, and maybe use channel partners as well. So they can do their own sales, but also latch on somebody else who has the scale to enable them to do that.
Great point, thank you. I think we're running out of time, but I do have one more question that we can do a quick answer to. When we talk exit strategies, it's very important for investors and for the companies, of course, as well. Given the current situation with capital markets, do you still see IPOs as the main exit strategy for digital health companies, Rana, or do you see a number of exciting M&A players that we should be watching? And I think pharma might be something to think about there as well.
Yes, sure. No, thanks for the question. I think if you asked me maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, I would say both. Maybe my personal, or at least what I see the behavior happening, including examples of companies we have currently in the portfolio, I think the inclination is more for M&A. And I think what really the acquirers are looking for, depending on the type of the acquirer, if it's a strategic acquirer, is really how the company that they are acquiring really can bring synergy, and they can really bring efficiency in terms of sharing capabilities that they have. Financial metrics are really very important for them. So a company that is really either profitable or on the way to profitability, and if not, there is a convincing evidence and a pipeline to show that they are going to get there in the short term. Also, lean cost structure is very important. So these are, and of course the top line with the growth, but very much financial kind of thinking here.
That's so helpful, thank you. Well, I guess we are running out of time. We've run out of time now. So personally, I just want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for incredibly helpful insights. It's been such a privilege to listen to all of you.
And thank you all for listening as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions, I guess.